He's here. Dr. Art from Dr. Art's Hot Rod Rehab is here.
Nice.
Fab Race Mon Repeat, Chris Cox out of Northeast Dragway. And that's about it. It's showing where it got 0 people watching, but there's already people commenting. So I'm sure there's a delay between YouTube and StreamYard. So
Yep.
No big deal. I see Buick Smith's already hit me with a question here. So let's pull that one up real quick. All right, right off the bat, is there anything out there or a way to mount a MAS on a carbureted engine? I have seen the big units they use on the dyno, but I'm looking for something to run on the street.
Mass airflow sensor is what he's trying to do?
That's what I'm assuming is a mass airflow sensor.
I wouldn't. I'd just run a map sensor because that will tell you manifold pressure drop. That's actually what you really want to know because that will tell you how to set up the carburetor.
Well, I'm wondering if he's trying to measure the air.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you could just run a tube off of it, but it's going to have to be a large diameter.
Well, I know, dang it. ProFlow offered one. I think it's ProFlow. The guys that did the 5-liter Mustang stuff, they had a mass air meter that was actually fit to a regular air cleaner diameter to fit underneath an air cleaner. I don't know if it's super expensive. I know their stuff is usually pretty good for stock 5-liter parts, like aftermarket replacement stuff. But I'm assuming that sensor is kind of a one-off deal.
Yeah,
and it's probably part of an EFI system that they have or have worked with. But there is one, I believe it's off of an LS7. It's a factory GM LS7 piece that's been modified to work on top of a carburetor to have I don't remember what the hat size is. 5 1/8, something like that. Some weird size.
Some weird size.
But it's standard size for a regular carburetor, so you can put a regular air cleaner on it as well.
Yeah. I understand what he's trying to do. So he's trying to see how much air the engine actually needs so we can see if he's got a bigger carb or a smaller carb. As far as how much that would cost, you could just go get a simple GM unit and put a vacuum from the carburetor to that and run a sensor off of it. That would be much easier.
For a map sensor?
Yeah. Because I would tell you, if you got a 750 CFM carb and you're running, let's just say, like 14.1 or something like that, you're not getting the full amount of air into it. That means that you need a bigger carburetor.
He's saying, okay, Dallas' comment last week about the QJet only metering what the engine needs got me thinking about how much airflow an engine needs while driving and how much my carbs are really flowing. Okay, well, to tell you the truth, you're probably not using anything really at all until you're wide open throttle. That's the only time you ever use that maximum CFM.
Yeah, you're only making like 40 horsepower. Going down the road, it's 40 or 50 horsepower at that.
Just to maintain road speed.
Yeah, exactly. Super lean, and that's the whole idea.
Colleen's saying that Tall John's Fun Shop did a video using a vacuum gauge. Here's a better idea, I think, for you. Okay, so, but that measures inches of vacuum, not a CFM reading. Is there a math formula to convert this? Okay, so I'm going to tell you something here kind of neat, all right? You don't necessarily need to read CFM of air.
Nope.
What you can do is get 2 different vacuum gauges, and you run one that's essentially off the carburetor on non-ported vacuum, and then one below the throttle blades. And you compare the reading at wide open throttle under load, right? And you can just run them up to the windshield, tape them on the windshield, and drive around. And when you mat that sucker, if the intake manifold vacuum is higher than the ported vacuum on the carburetor, I believe that's where it's going to cause what would be like an orifice plate, right? So if there's a difference in reading between the two, that generally means that you don't have enough CFM.
That's correct.
Buicks, I know they like big CFM carburetors, and that's kind of just run-of-the-mill Buick stuff, and that's because the intakes are they flow so poorly compared to aftermarket race pieces, and it kind of bottlenecks the carburetor. So the bigger the carburetor that you have on there, the better they run, because they don't have to fight the carburetor as well. It's not a big thing. I mean, if you're looking for every last horsepower, that's when guys would go like a 950 double pumper on a stock 455 Buick bore and stroke. But it is probably worth 5 horsepower or so. But you could definitely do that with creating your own differential pressure meter is what you're looking for. A difference between across the carburetor.
Yep.
And I don't know if non-ported vacuum on the carburetor would work. It would have to come out somewhere above the throttle blades is where it's actually reading from.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get a vacuum through there. I mean, you're going to have a Brunelli effect going on there. You know?
Right. Yep. All right. Let's see what else we got going. Oh man, there's a whole bunch of them jumped in here. All right. So Mitten Made Muscle, Uncle Squirrel. He's blaming squirrels again. Let's see. Bill McKyska, John Wilburn, Professor P. Yeah, he was the first one in here today. He literally had his camera set up, and I turned mine on at like 6:45, and he was already in here. So he's been jonesing for this all night, I guess. Ruckworks 1 is here. Dizzy Izzy, what's happening, Dizzy? Unity Motorsports Garage, Andy. He probably, see, Andy is one of the smartest carburetor guys I know. He probably has a better answer than the differential pressure thing, that he could probably tell you something that's cost effective. We'll see if Andy has anything to say about that. Buick Smith. Yep, that helps a lot. Well, I hope so. You got me wondering now. I kind of want to try it out.
Right? Yeah.
But here we are at Bad Tree Productions. Blake is in the house. So nice. These guys are John Wilburn and Blake are the mods I have set up here for us. So if we get any spam from porn spam, we at least got to see it first before you get rid of it.
Right?
That's exactly. Just how the rule goes.
Man, that's bad. Hold on. Okay, now take it off.
All right. Well, tonight, Wednesday night tech talk. Shane and I are just kind of getting into it with a. Oh, well, so Andy says exactly what we had said. Nope, a vacuum gauge will tell you what you need to know. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
I actually have 2 vacuum gauges.
Colleen's saying that Andy and Tall John's Fun Shop are my go-to carb guys. I don't know Tall John. I probably couldn't pick him out of a crowd unless he's just really, really tall. But I do know Andy, and Andy is really sharp on those things, those fuel atomizers. So I usually give him a call whenever I'm trying to do something. But I'm the official. So Blake says he's the official site checker.
Perfect.
So he's ahead of us. He's checking them all out first. If it's a good one, just let it go through.
Yeah, thumbs up or thumbs down. That's all I need.
All right, so we got 23 in here tonight. Hopefully we got some good questions. How was your week, Shane? Busy?
Busy. Yes, we got SEMA coming up. So, projects have to be done. You got to get pictures. There's a whole catalog of things. I can't tell what's going to be in it, obviously, but very, very, very stressful, getting those things done because, there's deadlines and stuff. And then the deadlines keep moving around. They're always in flux because, we're at the very bottom, obviously, because we're the guys making it. So these people need this and this person needs that. So the schedules always get shorter and shorter and shorter. So.
Right. Yeah. It just gets tighter and tighter. Right.
Yep,
John Wilburn says he tried to gain carb knowledge by osmosis last night from Andy. I heard, this is just hearsay. If you rub Andy's goatee when he's not looking, you gain carb knowledge.
Really?
Yeah. So you all see him at the No Name National. So give him a goatee rub.
Yeah. Big
Belly Racing's in the house. Ruckworts 1 says, I'm on a low carb diet. That's
good Dutch.
I'm kind of comfortable with fuel injection or carburetors. I find though that fuel injection seems to be the expensive carburetor, and you get about the same. I mean, you might find 1 or 2 miles to the gallon, but it's not really worth it. And my race car had, so I'll tell you the benefit I seen when I was racing Shane out in San Diego,
fuel.
Yeah, I would have 1 can of fuel for the whole weekend, and everybody else would have 3. Right?
I had 3. Every time I raced you, it was 5 gallons. For real. And I was running perfect 12.8, 12.5 mixture.
Yeah. Mine did not use much fuel at all. I raced that one whole season on 1.5 gallons, but I didn't go a lot of rounds. But I just raced the whole season out there, 2015 when I got there. I only used 1.5 gallons, which was kind of surprising because I had like 3 or 4 gallons at home. But it did not seem to use much at all.
Yeah, I'm actually going to give it a fuel injection a shot on my Slant 6. And for one reason, because of the runner length. They have really unequal runners. And I've tried all the carb arrangements and, turning them sideways and try this.
You can't get the fuel delivery exact in each cylinder because of that, right?
Exactly. Now, I've got it close. Now I can do a front and a rear as far as the wide bands. So I got those pretty close. But reading the plugs, there's a little bit of difference. It's a little fatter in the center, a little richer on the end. So this is going to be a multi-port type of fuel injection, and it's going to be nice. And it's going to have computer control for the ignition and the whole bit. So it's going to be really cool.
To tell you the truth, the Ford 306 had that, and it had the long runner plenum. You remember seeing those in the junkyard where they had one large plenum that your two throttle bodies fit on, and then you had the long runners.
Yeah,
right?
I remember those.
One of them was unequal length. They were not the same. I'll bet you that it makes a huge difference on that.
Yeah, and I'm going to run I'm not going to run a single butterfly because cracking a single butterfly, there's going to be a massive amount of air at the beginning. It's going to have a very touchy pedal. So I'm going to run like a progressive type of throttle body. So it's going to be like all the way to half throttle before the secondaries actually open up.
Oh, dude, you should do like the Ford truck ones where it's got two 55 millimeter throttle bodies.
No, that's a little much.
Oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't matter on EFI.
Yeah. Well, no, it does. It does when drivability.
Velocity.
Yes, it does on drivability. So like on tip in, that's the thing, is because if you have a big throttle body and you're opening this big throttle body, you have a lot of air change right off the bat and tip in. And so it becomes really sensitive on the pedal. And that's where that's the hard thing to tune. So that's why you want to for me, I'm going to run a throttle body. It's way too big, but I'm just going to run the two front barrels all the way up to half throttle. So I'll be driving on the front primaries, which is, for probably 350 or 400 CFM, which is basically a 2-barrel Holly. So I'll drive just like that. And then when I get on it, it's going to open up and then allow the air to flow. That pressure will drop all the way down to zero.
Nothing. Yeah. Well, Jonathan Couchy says, did you guys hear David Vizard is working on it with a cam company to come up with a line of camshaft grinds? No, I didn't hear that. I see the look on your face, Shane. Do you know anything about that?
No comment.
Okay. Well, I think it'd be interesting because David Vizard is the man when it comes to there's a reason why the guys at NASCAR call him and not me. Right. And that's because, one, he doesn't have a Wednesday night tech talk that talks about basic stuff. And two, David Vizard's been doing this for a millennia.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's amazing.
He has got it figured out.
It's hard to watch his videos, though. It's such a plethora of information, but it's just, you got to watch it in stages. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking bad about it. It's just that it's just hard to watch. That's all I'm saying.
Let's see. Fab Race Mod repeats saying, Shane, that twin throttle body thing I don't know what that means. So maybe it's missing a piece. He might have hit enter too soon.
Oh, yeah. It might hit a little soon.
Yeah. Okay. Dizzy Izzy. When I was a older guy, would talk about a dead spot in the carb. Would that not be enough CFM? Usually that's not enough fuel.
That's right. Exactly. That's usually between intermediate circuit, usually is where you're going to get a dead spot. Right after the pump shot, before the primaries start to come in.
The carburetor that I love, the Q-Jet, is absolutely the worst at this, right? And it's because you got the two little small barrels that are only like 250 CFM.
Yep.
And then when the secondaries open, they're like 550 CFM. Right? And because of that huge transition, if you don't have either one of them metered properly, because it has to have a little bit of transition to where it can go fat out of the primary. And so that when those big secondaries open up,
it goes lean.
It goes
clear it up.
Right. Now, if you got it to where it's not fat enough, they'll bog, right? Usually when the secondaries open, or the secondaries will open too early before, while vacuum's still at zero, the secondaries will open up and it comes in too fast, right? And it'll cause them to bog. But let's see. Mid Muscle says, I just ordered a cam from Cam Motion. Cam cores are scarce, but can be found. Best to have them ground from billet or have it hardness treated.
Yeah,
This
or
has
nitrated.
been ongoing a while, guys.
Yeah.
Probably 2 years, I'd say, Shane.
Yeah. The thing is that I think this whole, and I'm not going to get political, but I'm going to say the plandemic. So just hear me out. But when that whole thing was going on, there was things just aren't being made anymore. And I think they just found a loophole to stop making things. And I think that's just what's happening. I can't really comment more beyond that, but it's just for us, even with at comp, it's hard to get cores. There's just companies that are just stop making cores.
Well, I've been waiting for a Buick big block core, not just from you guys. I've been looking for one for 3 months so I can finish up this Give a F Friday 430. Somebody wanted to buy it, put a cam in it. Oh, piece of cake. Usually that's not a problem. Now it's like, holy cow, I called every manufacturer. Nobody even has a core. They're all waiting on the same thing, cores. And I ended up working around it by finding a big, monstrous solid lifter cam and then send in essentially my core to have it ground. But that's the only way that I could fix it in the interim right now while everyone's waiting. So, let's see what the next question is here. Okay. What Zonda 2B says, I want to do 300 to 350 foot-pounds of torque, slant 6 for a 70 Duster, and I want to do draw through. What carb do you recommend? This is going to be a street cruiser.
Well, a draw through turbo, I'm assuming that's what he's talking about, turbo instead of a supercharger. That's going to be a crappy driver, because draw throughs just don't work all that well. I had to draw through on a Volkswagen on my drag bug. It was just a pain in the ass to start.
Well, the Buicks came factory, 78, 9, and 80. The V6, you could get it in any platform GM offered with the turbocharged V6, and it was a draw-through carburetor setup. And it
was sitting right on the manifold.
They were, but they were finicky at best.
Yeah.
And then originally that design came from the Oldsmobile Jetfire, I think is what it was, which was the high-end economy car. Came with the 215 Buick, or actually it's the 215 Olds. It uses its own set of heads, and then it had a draw-through turbo setup on it. But their draw-through, there's a reason why no one else uses them anymore, right?
That's right.
And that's because, like Shane was saying, you get your atomization correct coming out of the base of the carb, but then it's got to go through the plenum into the turbo, and then it doesn't distribute air evenly as the turbo spits it out the other side, right? It's no longer, it's still atomized. It's just not distributed evenly. And Buick overcame this by putting essentially two 90-degree turns in it and making the opening really small. So the velocity was really high coming through. But when you do that, the pressure coming out of that turbo increases the temperature insanely, right? And they detonate really bad. But they did make 5 horse, they were 5 more horse than a 305 Chevy in those days. If you can convert that thing to a blow through, and it's probably actually going to work better.
I would agree with you. Yeah, go to a blow through. I'd put a 350 Holly on it. You could go to a 4-barrel, but a 352 barrel Holly would be just fine. You know, especially for a street cruiser, you don't need all that carburation, and just run, a decent exhaust and you'll be fine. That's what I would do personally.
And the easy thing to do, if you're looking around for that stuff, you can probably find one of those setups off of a turbo V6 Buick.
Yeah,
they're
goes right on.
Really cheap.
Yeah.
And if you get the quadrajet with it, remember the quadrajet was only feeding 231 cubes. So it's probably calibrated perfectly to work with your Slant 6, which is only 225 cubes, right?
Yep.
I think it would be a easy bolt-on. Now, drivability may be a factor, but I don't know. I think it'd be an interesting thing to see. But 300 to 350 foot-pounds of torque, I imagine that thing could easily do that with about, 10 pounds of boost maybe.
Yeah. 10 pounds is really pushing it on Slant 6 because you'll blow the head gasket. You could blow the head gasket and it becomes very finicky. You're going to have to get some really good head gaskets and get some studs on it. If I were going to do this, I was already thinking about doing a turbo, but remember, mine is Slant daily, not Slant race. So I was looking at running like a 4-cylinder turbo, something that was really small, because I don't care what happens past 4,000.
Right. You're just wanting that 4 to 6 pounds of boost at part throttle, right?
You got it. So I want something that comes right on between, like, say 1,500 to like 3,500. That's all I want. That's all
Perfect
I care.
driving area.
That's right. So that way it has all the torques, you know what I mean, right away, you know.
Exactly. When I finally get to this, that's the one thing for me is I've been fighting, just trying to get stuff done because of the schedules with No Name Nationals coming up and stuff here. I've been wanting to get to that boat anchor 350 because that's the one I really want to do. Basic stock motor with a single turbo on it, and I think it's going to be a monster.
It's gonna be awesome.
All right, so
to finish that up, I would go through a blow through carb on that one if you want to Zona 2B. Is that how it is? Zona 2B?
What Zonda?
Yeah. Anyways, I would go through a blow through. I wouldn't go through a draw through. Personally, that's just my opinion. To be a little bit better of a driver.
Okay, Bad Tree Production says I like to dial on a little preset bog to help with traction. LOL.
It's true.
It's easy to do with a large secondary carburetor.
That's right.
Just put the wrong jets in it, and you'll find out fast. Okay. Let's see. Andy says, I can't wait to shot put a Q-jet. Just say it. And, John was asking me if I could bring the stunt double stage 1. Because I did a video like way back when I first started Mr. Rodder's Neighborhood. That was probably like the 3rd video. Right? I don't know if you saw it. Did you, Shane?
I don't know. I'm gonna take a look here while you're going.
I did a video and I said, hey, what's inside a stage 1 carburetor? The Holy Grail, right? That's the one that Buick guys love, the stage 1 carb. Oh, it's so epic and it's so sought after. And so I decided I had a 71 stage 1 carburetor, and it literally had sat out in the rain for 25 years. And I knew it was going to be pretty crusty on the inside when I couldn't get the screws out because they were frozen into the body.
Yeah.
So I had soaked it for a week in penetrating oil and in hot penetrating oil, right? I got it apart, and it was just pieces were crumbling. Like as you're taking it apart, the aluminum's just so bad it's falling apart. And I made the video, and then I watched the video, and I'm like, how lame is this video? It's so boring. It's like there's nothing to it. It's just me fighting with screws to get this carburetor apart that's a crusty turd. And so I'm like, well, I got an old Q-jet over there on the bench, or not the bench, but on my shelf, and I just smashed the crap out of it with a ball bat, right? And I videotaped that, and I threw it in with that video, and guys were like, there was death threats. You're a freaking idiot. Why would you even smash a stage 1 carburetor like that? Like, I didn't smash stage 1. I have more than one Q-jet, but
that's funny.
So I will bring it, and it's kind of bent in the middle. It's unhappy, and I don't know if I can even screw it back together, but I'll bring it so you guys can shot put that thing.
Yeah, that'd be good. I got 12 gauge pull,
Yeah, well, they're doing a carburetor shot put for a fundraiser for St. Jude. So it's like a couple of bucks to pitch a quadrijet. Whoever's got the longest throw wins some cash, right? It's something that Dave Vizard and John Wilburn have put together.
Oh, good.
Jonathan Couchy asks, do you have any combinations for a street strip 360 budget?
Yes, buy the best heads you can. Get some Magnum heads if you can. Then build it around that, because the problem with 360 is the cylinder heads. Really, there's just not a lot of flow from there. You can get a decent power out of them. If you email me at slantdailygarage@yahoo.com, I have some little recipes that I know make 450, 460 horse, and you can kind of change it on with stuff, but it tells you the exact carburetor, the exact camshaft, everything that you need to make X amount of power.
Well, and it doesn't matter what engine you're building. It's actually a rule of thumb. Okay. If you're building something for street strip, don't worry about the bottom end. Okay. Right. It'll never see the RPM to be concerned with big time, high dollar parts. Buy the best heads that your budget will allow, right?
Absolutely.
And if you can find a good Magnum head that's been ported, and you got $500-600 in them, put the bottom end together for whatever you can, and it's still going to run good.
I ran a stock bottom end 360 all the way up to a 250 shot of nitrous. It's not gonna blow. That was figuring 550 horse or something, shifting at about 7,000 RPM. They're good. It's just the cylinder head. There's just not enough flow through it.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, so code improvements. How much can a stock can be reground? Is it comparable to heat treatment?
Okay. I know quite a bit about this. The camshaft tells you. So before I can even answer that, the camshaft has to come in. In fact, I've got 2 cams from Dallas right now. I have to profile it. So I'll run it through the cam doctor, and that will tell me what the base circle is. That is basically 90 degrees from the lobe, how far that is from the core, and then obviously what kind of camshaft we're talking about, flat tappet, roller, so on and so forth. Most people are talking about like a solid flat tappet. On average, you can usually change those. This is just an average, about 10 to 15 degrees plus or minus, and give it about another 10 thousandths at lobe lift, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a massive. And you can usually tighten up the LSA by about 2 degrees. So let's just say, for instance, it's 220 on a 112 LSA. You could probably get 235 on a 110. That's a whole different camshaft altogether.
And that's quite a bit. And it's right now, the way things are going, where you can't get a cam core. If you got a good solid cam,
use it,
send it in and get it reground.
That's right.
It costs probably I'm okay. So when you buy a custom ground cam, you're usually looking at $300-350, somewhere around there. Okay. That's them providing the cam core. If you provide your own cam core, the price comes down to probably what, $250, $300.
I don't know. I don't know.
That, nobody reground cams in our generation at all. You just bought a new one. So I don't have
so cheap.
Yeah, I had no experience to speak of, but I know my father's generation, regrinding a camshaft used to be the only way to do it sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's actually how, when I was at Crowder, that's exactly how Crowder was doing it, is they were regrinding camshafts. And that's how he got a start, and then cranks and then rods and so on and so forth. And even Comp does the same thing, and there's a lot of companies still do that. It's still viable.
Well, Big Billy Racing asks, which Slant engine is the best to use with the turbo?
Any of them would be fine. The later versions with the hydraulic, they just have a lighter crankshaft. Other than that, they're way overbuilt.
That would be the one to have with that lighter crank.
Yes.
It's been quick.
Yes, it does.
On it.
But it really comes down to what you're doing, and you're really talking about, that's kind of an open-ended statement. For me, anything over 250, 300 horse is really not even really streetable for me anymore, because I drive my stuff everywhere. So for me, and the way I read that, any of them would be fine. It wouldn't make a difference.
Knit Made Muscle says motor car casting in Wisconsin closed for good not long ago. They cast iron for big names like Dart and Callie's for the 427 or 426 Hemi blocks. That's sad. I hate to see that go. And that was the biggest problem when I started doing the AHRA was I only wanted to work with manufacturers that made stuff in the United States. And this day and age, that ship may have sailed. I literally have so few sponsors because I tell them that up front. I'm looking for manufacturers that it's got to be made in the USA first and foremost. I've called the American Hot Rod Association, not the Chinese Hot Rod Association or the Taiwanese Hot Rod Association.
Yeah.
And the focus was to try to promote those entities because you work together and make something good, right?
Yeah.
I hate to hear that. Okay, so Buick Smith says, I think the first drivetrain I'm going to try on my Buick El Camino is a 225 V6 with 50-pound flywheel, 3-speed manual, and 279 rear with 26-inch tall tire. We'll do some aero mods to a bit like a lake style. That Buick El Camino is cool. I seen one at the Nationals where somebody did like a 70 to 72 El Camino, and they put Buick quarter panels and stuff on it. It looked legit. It looked like a GSX. Actually, it was a GSX clone El Camino, and it looked really good.
That's actually his final drive ratio is exactly what my car would be. And the 3-speed manual would be a 1-to-1. I'm running a 276 with a 26.3 diameter tire at 80 miles an hour. And I think I'm at about 27 100 RPM, and I can cruise around at 70 miles an hour at 2650. So that's a perfect combination for a driver. That thing will hum right
along. It being an El Camino, it's actually going to be lighter.
Yeah.
So it would be
perfect.
I think it might make it actually sing right along. Now, it's not going to be lighter than Shane's car, because Shane's car is a unibody, right? But that thing is a perimeter frame. It probably weighs everything from 32 to 3,400 pounds, but depending on what year car he's got.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see.
Go back to Big Belly. He's actually asking again.
This one?
Yeah, he's asking the question again. To do that for turbocharged any particular year, it really comes down to what you want to do. If you get something prior to 81, that's going to be a mechanical flat tappet. Personally, I prefer mechanical flat tappet. That way I can pick what I want and how the cam's going to react depending on lash. Some people like the hydraulic flat tappets. Not necessarily for me. I would pick something pre-81. Now it's going to be heavier crank, so it's not going to RPM nearly as fast. It's just going to be a beefier type of deal. Or I'm actually working on right now where I'm taking a hydraulic head, I'm putting it on a different block, and I'm going to try to run some hydraulic flat tappets, and maybe even, I don't even know, maybe a hydraulic roll. But it really, I would go pre-81 if you just don't want to get into the hydraulic, because it's going to bleed down. So when you start up, it's going to sound like the hounds of hell, and then it's going to flatten out. So I would just go with the mechanical flat tappet pre-81. Pick one.
Ruckworts one says O-ring the block or heads.
I wouldn't. I just get a good head gasket. Just get a mechanic. I run the stock Victor Wrens on mine, and I beat the crap out of mine, and it's fine.
All right. Well, it's good to know there. So Battery Production's saying there's videos on YouTube to turn your carb into a blow-through carb. Be thrifty.
Yep.
So let's see. What Zonda 2B says, thanks, guys. Appreciate it a lot. All right. Well, no problem. Hopefully we helped you out.
Yeah. And if you want, you got any other questions, you can always throw them up to slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. There was a bunch of questions there from last week, and I answered them all. So, yeah, I get to them when I can.
Doug Narden made it over from the transitional phase. We're now in the, what is this, the 4th or 5th week of doing
Fifth one. I think it's the number 5. I don't know.
Wow.
I've lost
it. They're going by so quick, to be honest with you. So here's John Wilburn chiming in. Carburetor shop put $5 a throw for St. Jude. So let me catch up here. There's a lot of questions starting to come all at once, and I'm stopping at every single one, unfortunately. Okay, Jonathan Couchy, do you think you could get 400 horsepower out of this combo for a 364 barrel, ported heads, intakes, 188 intake valve?
Yes,
headers?
Easily. That's an easy combination right there. Ported heads, there's your horsepower right there. Everything else is just secondary. So yes, easily. The 8.5 to 1 is going to kill you a little bit, but I would tighten with the 107 LSA. That's going to help that 8.5 to 1. So it's going to sound a little bigger than what it is, but yeah, you could easily get 400 horse out of that. They released some Magnum engines that were 300 horse and 380 horse ones, and they actually made like 400 something, and they were not nowhere near.
They were 9-to-1 compression.
Yeah, they were 9-to-1 compression. Exactly.
Yeah. Terrence Seymour. Hey guys, just got back from an inspection here in New Zealand on his 67 C body. We called him a warrant of fitness in New Zealand. It flew through without an issue for another 6 months. Sweet. Yeah, he had asked us a question about what timing or carburetor a couple weeks ago.
Awesome. Congratulations, bitchin'.
All right. All right. So Andy says at least $20 worth of throws until my rotator cuff says no more.
Bitchin'.
So we'll have the stage 1 stand-in over there.
You're talking about throwing them. Is that just with a hand, or can you use like some sort of like mechanical advantage? I never said that. I'm just saying. I'm just saying mechanical advantage. That's all I'm asking.
You trying to throw it to the next county, Shane? It's all by hand. Oh,
it's by hand. Okay. Well, okay. So hand only, or hand with mechanical advantage?
Just hand and carburetor.
Okay.
So Doug Narden, late last night, I scored a Sun 1120 engine analyzer. It is outdated. Yes, it is looking absolutely bitching in my shop. Yes, looks good next to my Sun model 1500 or model 500 distributor machine. I'm jealous. I actually just ordered a dwell meter today.
What?
I did. I don't have a dwell meter, right? I never screwed with points. I mean, I was born after the last points were used.
Yeah.
And I was never a points guy, but I've seen the light now, and I have to run points on my super stock motor. It's the big one.
Yeah.
But I got, I think, 3 engines right now have points, and I can't get them to run with a crap. And I figured that dwell meter is probably going to fix what ails me.
Yeah.
Because they're all just set with a feeler gauge, and that's it.
Yeah, and then on the Chevrolet ones, which is bitching, they got the little window that opens up, and it's got the little Allen key, and you can set them, and you just
Buicks have them too.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so it's running, so you just adjust that little screw, and
yeah,
it runs better or worse.
My dwell meter's an old Craftsman.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's
the one I just got is a Sears Penske one. I looked at one. They had one from Snap-on. It was $55 and not known to work. They don't know if it works or not because they don't have a car. I'm assuming with points to check the dwell on it. But Riley's Rebuilds is in here.
Hey, what's
guys,
going on?
My dad and I are driving home from soccer listening to you. Well, sweet.
Nice.
I like that idea.
Good.
And it was a pleasure to have you on here too. You know what? We actually got a really good question after the show ended. They wanted to know if you test out the carburetors when you're done. Do you try them out on something?
She's probably going to answer, but it's all the way down here.
Yeah.
But I do have a question also, right? This is actually for your dad. Actually not a question. I just want to say a statement. We wanted to say, Wesley and I wanted to say thank you for sending us all that information on the VRS carburetor that you sent back to us. That was really good. That was awesome. So thank you for that.
Deke Denny says the foundries are probably slowing down on ICE engine parts as they gear up for more Prius and Tesla parts as we get closer to 2030, 2035. You know, that's probably not a bad assumption of what's going on. You know?
Yeah, but at the same time, that's going to be the California stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not too worried about it.
All right. So Made Muscle, $440 for a custom big block Chevy billet core 4.7 swap with a cast iron gear for cam motion. So they're going up as well.
Yep.
Okay. So that gives you a good idea. Let's see. How good are 455 Buick heads and where are the restrictions? Okay. My opinion, 455 Buick is under cylinder headed by a lot. So I've done some research over the years, and so the stock 455 head is only 176 cc intake runners.
Ooh.
Stage 1 uses that same casting. So even though it has bigger valves, it doesn't have the ability to flow the air through the head. There is an early casting, 67 and 68. They made one called the Big Port. Okay, it only came on 430 Wildcat engines, like it would have been in Wildcat. So you had to have the top of the line 430. It was 360 horse, I think. But it could come in Riviera or Wildcat, but they flow 195 CFM even with the smaller valves. So I imagine if you were to take that 195 CFM and throw some stage 1 valves at it that are considerably bigger, they're 200 thousandths bigger, you'd probably find that might be your best cylinder head to get, besides ponying up the money for a set of stage 2s, which was a complete redesign, where you need different headers, and it just gets costly.
Yeah.
Okay, so Doug Narden wants to know, does anyone weld cam lobes anymore?
Yeah. What was it? Webcam does. They'll weld cast iron. So there was a few cams that we did that were custom, and they welded up cams for us.
Let's see. Gypsy J Rides. I have never seen this person here. What day and time is the Burnout contest in Sykeston? That's on the Friday night. So the 30th of September, Friday night. After we're done with the bracket racing, we're hoping to go right into it about 7 o'clock. And that's when the hides get boiled. The smoke show begins, right? So I imagine it's going to be a lot of fun, just because where John and I picked to do this thing is not where you would normally do it, right? Normally you would do it somewhere where everybody could sit around and see it in the stands. This is at the far end of the track to give you a lot more room. So it's at the shutdown and it's going to be pretty different and fun. It gives you a lot more room down there in the shutdown. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can catch up. There's quite a few of them. Let's see. Big Block 402A Dallas Hope Balls. We're going good, buddy. Hopefully I answered your questions as best as possible the other day. Let's see. Buick Smith says 65 El Camino weighs in at 2,900 pounds. I think I can get it down to 2,800 pounds. So that's his Buick El Camino with 225 6-cylinder in it. That's probably not going to be a bad combo at all. That's a fairly light car. So you're probably looking at 25 miles a gallon just as is without really getting into it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Big Block 402 asks, is it much trouble to swap a Barry Grant 750 alcohol carburetor to run E85 or just stick with alcohol? You know what's funny? I was kind of looking at this myself today. I was actually going to take an alcohol and convert it back to gas. I think it may be easier just to run alcohol in it.
Yeah.
Because you're changing almost everything. Metering blocks, float, needle and seat, squirters,
everything.
Yeah, it's pretty much everything. So all you're starting with is a main body and some bowls.
That's right. Yeah.
And I don't even, and it may be different between E85 and straight alcohol, where the base plate might actually have different transition slots in it because you're using so much more fuel with alcohol than versus the E85 or gasoline.
Yeah, I don't know if I've never changed from alcohol to E85. I've done the other way, like from gasoline to E85 or E85 back to gasoline, but I've never done that. So, I mean, I couldn't tell you, but there's got to be a kit for it. You know, it's got to be easy.
Dr. Art says he knows about them points. Yeah, we just put some in the Lemons car. I still haven't put that snippet up yet, but Dr. Art is on my Lemons team. He's one of the crew guys for the Lemons team.
Yeah.
And we finally got that 95 Mercedes with the Buick 350 and it's running, and we went through all the gears and it goes into gear. So now 350 Buick turbo 400 transplanted into a 95 Mercedes. And for all those hater suckers out there that said this car would never run, how's that crow taste?
Perfect.
Right? So
I saw it. It looks bitchin'.
Let's see. Yeah, with being Dr. Art. Well, Dr. Art threw a set of points in it. That's what it needed. It had burnt the unipoints out. So, okay. Coda improvements. Any tips on porting iron cylinder heads for the first time? Small block Mopar closed chamber style.
Take your time. Go slow. And take pictures. They sell templates. Mopar is one of those companies that are just awesome. They'll sell you templates. Go to eBay and find porting templates for your heads. And they come up with 4 or 5 different areas, and that's how I learned, is that they have these little, you put it at this angle and then you basically cut it so that way the whole port, that little template, gets to that point. Then they have another template you turn, like say 45 degrees, and you port there and then you port there. So that's what I would do if this is just a stock style head. Go to eBay, find the port templates for Mopar heads, and then go that route. That's what I would do.
The biggest problem I had doing this was don't get greedy.
It's right.
Right.
Go
That's
slow.
the hardest thing to do is not get greedy. Oh, that looks pretty good. Let me go a little further. Right. Yeah. And then next thing you know, your whole tool falls in the hole. Right.
Water jacket.
Yeah.
And then remember, you got to do whatever you do to one, you have 7 more times to do that, so it's, go
don't
slow.
Get greedy. And if you're doing, let's see, the cast iron, and I'm no head porter by any means. I have literally just hogged out one set in my life. But the hardest thing, like the rough finish is the one that you need on a cast iron head. You want to go like a 60 grit flapper disc. And that's it, right? Yeah. You don't want to get crazy on it.
Polish the combustion chamber and the exhaust is what I've always been told.
Yeah. Yep. And it's supposed to help atomization when it's got that rough finish.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't pool onto the walls.
Yep. Craig Chitto asks, was putting Buick heads on a small block Chevy a big deal back when? Yeah. Okay. So this actually all stems from the Buick V6 Stage 2 program. They figured out the tall narrow ports, right? That's what the Stage 2 V6 Buick was. What Chevrolet did was well, I guess the guys at Chevrolet, the racing component of Chevrolet, figured out if that port works good on that Buick, it's going to work great on our Chevrolet small block. Right. And they ran okay, but if you want to see the next version of that, go look at an LS. That's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Stage 2 V6 Buick with it's virtually a Buick V8 under it.
And LS is kind of a bastard of a lot of things. It's got, I would consider it more closely to the Windsor.
That's a lot of people say that. Here's what's funny. Okay, so the first year the Windsor was what, 62, 63? That small little like 221 or 255 or whatever it was. It was small.
Yeah.
But if you put a small block Ford and a 215 or 300 Buick side by side,
mm-hmm.
they look so stinking similar. It's stupid.
Yeah. Well, the reason being is because of the firing order. An LS firing order and a Windsor are the exact same firing order, just in different positions because of the
4.7 cam swap, right?
Yeah, 4.723 actually. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Ruckwarts. That would be Ron Ward is the announcer at the No Name Nationals. And Don English says he's claiming front row and center for everything at the No Name Nationals. Just saying. Let's see. John Wilburn saying the Destroyer1320.com, smoke them if you got a Burnout competition. And I'm working on John and I last talked earlier today, and I was working on a commemorative decal for the No Name Nationals.
Nice.
So if you're an AHRA member or you become a member, you're going to get a commemorative decal for the No Name Nationals.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh, Mopar Al. See ya.
Where's he at? I didn't see him.
He's right below. Next one down.
Okay. Got to meet Dr. Art last Saturday. Yeah, he's a good dude. It's a good dude. He does burnouts in front of his house, and then the neighbors put those speed machines in the front yard. Okay, I have a Barry Grant 4-port fuel pressure regulator with no return. Can I make a return line with a ball valve to adjust the fuel rate, the flow rate on return? You probably could, because you can regulate it with that ball valve, but I don't know if that's because it doesn't take into account the use of fuel from the carburetor.
That's correct. It's got to have a pressure differential between the two. I personally wouldn't do it. For something like that, with the Barry Grants, they were designed for a fuel pump that returned at the fuel pump. So they have those fuel pumps that are at the back, and they would just bypass and they would send the pressure up to the fuel port. So if you're going to run that, I wouldn't run a ball valve, because that would only work at X amount of flow. But when you got to a higher, when the delta changed, it just would never be able to adjust.
And the cheap, easy way to do that would be you run a Holley red pump.
There you go. Right.
The red pumps have a regulated return inside of them, and it keeps them at like 4 or 6 pounds. Now, they don't put a ton of volume out because it's a red pump, but there's nothing stopping you from running 2 of them in parallel.
That's right.
Right. So, let's see. Jonathan Couchy, my brother-in-law, has a 68 Fury 3 with a stock 318, only has a Mopar M1 intake on it. I told him to get some 596 heads, a mild cam like 256H, and Magnum exhaust manifolds. Would that wake up that 318 and that's a big car, the 68 Fury?
Yeah. Honestly, instead of the 496 heads, I mean, if you're going to buy heads, buy the Engine Quest, the Magnum heads. They're the stock replacement heads for those. And there's a lot of people that are selling those things on eBay, and they work good. If you could get something that had, like, say, I wouldn't necessarily go with the 202 160 with a 318, just my personal opinion. I would go with like the 188 style intake, because that way you're just not going to kill the velocity on that engine. But I would go with that, because that's gonna flow a lot. And the 318, that thing's a screamer. With that type of camshaft, it'll be awesome. It'll work good. You'll easily make that money, that power.
Jonathan Couchy's throwing a little bit of knowledge out here. When porting a small block Mopar, focus on the bowls first. I watch a lot of David Vizard's videos and read his books. Maximize the pushrod pinch, then blend the walls into the bowls.
Yeah, that's exactly what those templates tell you to do. Exactly that right there. And in fact, what's funny about that is that when he says right here, maximize the bowls first, that's exactly what I do on a Slant 6. I don't go anything more on my on my engines. I just do the bowl, I back cut the valves, I gain almost 20 CFM just by doing that. And then you could go crazy on the port on the Slant 6, and you're going to gain probably another 20. But just doing the bowls and back cutting the valves on a Slant 6 is good for 20 CFM on average. That's what I see all the time. So yes, that's what I would do first, and then find the templates.
Well, Jonathan Couchy says, I'll be posting a video series on some 596 open chamber 360 heads I did earlier this year. Perfect. That's exactly what that young guy needs that was looking to port those heads, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Dizzy Izzy, is UTG going to announce part? Far as I know, UTG, as in Uncle Tony, will not be at the No Name Nationals. He plans on not being there. He has some kind of scheduling conflict deal with Andy and headers and whatever have you, and he will not be there. Let's see. Jonathan Couchy says, I have a set of open chamber 178 intake valve 318 heads I did. My goodness, the torque in my Power Wagon has ported Edelbrock intake headers and XE 256H cam.
It's perfect setup. Exactly. You know.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're caught up here. So, which is kind of unbelievable. I did skip over some stuff. Let's see what we did get most of them, the big ones though. All right. Well, now it's time to talk about burritos and whatever else we have you.
Burritos, right?
Yeah. I think that was the first video. We talked more about burritos than we did anything else.
Yeah.
Buick Smith. Well, a
John Couchy.
From a 308 Buick rear fit my 279 or a different carrier. Okay. I'm assuming, how did I get rid of that? Okay. I'm assuming you probably mean that El Camino, Buick El Camino. That Buick El Camino that you're building, just because it has Buick shaped sheet metal on it, probably has a Chevrolet 8.2 rear end in it. Because that's what those El Caminos came with in 64, 5, I think 6 and 7. They came with a 8.2 inch. Don't get that confused with the Buick 8.2. I do not think that they're interchangeable. I think the Buick 8.2 is considerably beefier than that Chevrolet 8.2, because not just the Buick 8.2, but it was a Buick Olds Pontiac 8.2. That's what every GTO came with. You know, every 442 and every W30 machine came with those, and is including the Stage 1 Buicks in 70. That 8.2 is considerably stronger than an 8.2 Chevrolet, which would generally puke its guts if you had a 327 and a camshaft. So I don't think they're interchangeable. I wouldn't try it unless you just want to be disappointed, because both of those rear ends are getting really, really hard to find parts and pieces for. Matter of fact, there was just somebody posted on Facebook the other day the first parts and pieces they've seen in 10 years for a Buick 8.2, BOP 8.2. So, let's see. Jonathan Couchy says they make the EQ 192 valves with LA bolt pattern.
The Engine Quest heads. Yes, the Engine Quest, they were normally just the Magnum ones where the bolts came straight down. So now they actually make them now with the bolt patterns going at an angle, so you can run your older style intakes, or like a dual pattern. So yeah, the Engine Quest heads are really incredibly good. They were I was rocking those things back in the early 2000s. They were really good stuff.
Well, here's a very good tidbit from Doug Narden. He says, I do some serious searching on the net, and you can find a PDF of the Mopar big block porting templates. Mm-hmm. It also has pics of the proper size with a mic, so you can print them out correctly.
Perfect. There you go.
Mopar Al says tacos. He wasn't into the burritos, but tacos he's into.
Dude, I'm telling you, I went to a taco place that rivals that SoCal taco that you brought me to. It's close. Oh, really? Yeah, but here's the thing: is it didn't have any citrus. We went there on Saturday. We went for a little Slant daily, family drive. We drove nothing but back roads, and we went down some roads that didn't even have lines on them. We took the whole family. It was hot. Who cares? And we went and had tacos. Then we went to Arlington. Then we came back through like this Arlington, Collierville, like little back road. Good. It was not inexpensive, but it was very good. In fact, my last video I made, I put some pictures of our taco, burrito extravaganzas there. So yeah, it was it was nice because, you know, that's stuff that you have in San Diego that you just don't get here, you know? So, yeah.
So Buick Smith says, I'm using Buick rears, getting rid of the Chevy rear. Well, okay, if you're using a Buick rear and you want to know if that 308 posi unit will work, the way that GM used to do it was where the ring gear bolts on, that the actual ring on the carrier. They used to change the thicknesses on that because when your pinion got smaller, they had to move that gear in somehow.
Inside,
right? Yeah. So what they did was that thickness on that gear gets more and more and more, right? I would measure, or not the gear, I'm sorry, that ring that the gear bolts to. I would measure both of them and see if they're the same thickness. Generally, the cutoff is 308 and lower, numerically lower, and anything 308 up, right? So it's like, or anything above 308 and up. So it'd be like 323 is good to like, I don't know, 410 or something. And then it changes again. I think 456 has its own one. But let's see here. I would measure that. And if they're the same, try it out. If you have two carriers from BOP 8.2s, probably work great. SD wants to know, what makes the Buick 8.2 rear axle stronger? It is a completely different design. So Buicks in the early years, actually Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and Buick shared a lot of the parts amongst each other. That's why it's actually called the BOP. But the rear, okay, so the Buicks, they wanted to have more foot and leg room than a Chevrolet. That was the whole thing. It was, you know how Mercedes does their noise, vibration, harshness stuff through the roof? Well, Buick, Olds, and Pontiac used to do the comfortability through the roof. There was something that you were paying for that had to differentiate themselves from Chevrolet. You're paying extra money for a car. Let's give you something that's different that you can immediately see and feel, right? Well, one of those was decreasing the size of the transmission tunnel. Okay. And when they did that, that meant the pinion in the carrier had to move down. And when you move the pinion in the carrier down, it actually makes it
it's a hypoid angle.
Right. Well, I want to say when you move the pinion down, it makes it stronger. Stronger.
Yep. But it takes more
power.
Yep.
Right.
That's why a Ford 9-inch is so good. It's because the hypoid, it's called the hypoid angle, and that's where the pinion comes into the ring gear. The farther it is, the farther down, it makes it stronger because it can't climb on top of itself. And that's why it does that. That's why a Ford 9-inch is so bitching, because that hypoid angle is so low, and where it's at. But it takes a lot of power.
Power hog.
That's right. Power hog.
Whoa! I got some kind of moth in here. Wow. So I guess my kids must be opening and closing the door. All right. So that's what makes that rear end stronger, though, is it actually lowered the pinion on it. It's a completely different housing. It is the way it's engineered makes it stronger. Oh yeah. Okay. Seth McFulton says, seen a video today about the SR71 being started by Buick V8s. Yeah, that used to be two nail heads side by side.
Really? Is that for real?
Yeah, that's a real deal.
Wow.
Yeah. Look at the SR71 start cart video.
Okay.
And I'll show you it. They had Buick 401s because it was the only engines in the inventory that could actually turn those things over. And then when they stopped making the nail heads, they didn't know what they were going to do. They ended up going to LS6 big block Chevys. I think what they went to make the torque that was needed to turn the thing over. It really wasn't so much the horsepower; it was the torque.
Yeah, and you want the torque.
Yeah, and that's what the nail head is super famous for. They really don't have any beans up top, but man, are they stump pullers. All right, Buick Smith. I have 5 Buick 8.2 rears, 279 open, 308 posi, 323 open, and 346. Why don't you just put the 308 posi rear end in the thing then?
Yeah, it's perfect. Throw it in there.
All right. Let's see.
You know, while you're looking for one, I was going to talk to you about this. I'm going to be on, Drag Week on the 1920? Oh, September. What is that going to be? The 21st. So I'll be in a hotel room, obviously. So I'll try to do the live feed on during drag week. I'll still try to do it.
So Dizzy Izzy's talking about his family used to own a farm before the War of Northern Aggression. Well, that must have been a while ago, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What Zonda 2B says, just saw that at Wright Patterson Air Force Base last week. What a coincidence. So that's the SR-71 start cart. That thing is pretty neat. What is going on here? All right. Wow, okay. So Dizzy Izzy's related to Robert E. Lee, huh? All right. Well, if you got any more questions, throw them out there. We're literally 1 hour in. Don't you like to do some heavy tech right now?
Yeah. Let's do some heavy tech. I was kind of touching on it the other day, but I did get a lot of questions about this, and it's about lobe separation angle once again and how it relates. Like, what exactly does it do? Like, what exactly does it do? And I was trying to explain to him, it's not just the lobe separation angle. Once again, it's the relationship between the duration of 50 on the intake and the duration of 50 on the exhaust and the tightening. What I was trying to explain to him is that it's not like you're going to have a 106. I know that I'm repeating myself from a few weeks ago, and I apologize, but this seems to be difficult for people to grasp. A 106 isn't always going to do the exact same thing on one engine as it will do with another because of the duration of 50. So my very first one, I was asked by Uncle Tony, when I pick a cam, how do I pick it? First thing I pick is duration of 50 on the intake. The next thing I picked is duration of 50 on the exhaust. The very next thing I'm going to pick is the lobe separation angle. Lobe separation angle is going to tell me how the engine's going to react. Is it going to make, am I going to make a very broad power band and I'm going to stretch that power band out? Do I want it really narrow? So it's not going to be just a 106 will make it narrow. If you have 286 duration of 50 and 300, you put it on a 114, that's a really tight LSA for that much. You're going to have a huge triangle. On my Slant 6, I've got a 106 LSA, but it's on a 217 duration of 50. So the triangle is very small. So you have to take into account the duration of 50 on the intake, duration of 50 exhaust, and the lobe separation angle. Get how much overlap you're going to have. Typically, once you get up into, like, say, the 25, 26 degrees duration of 50 as far as overlap, it's going to be talking to you. You're really going to hear it. If you're into, say, like under 10, it's kind of a muscle car sound, but it's not going to be out of control. And you can usually run some sort of vacuum advance and some like vacuum brakes. Let's put it that way. You'll be able to run some sort of vacuum control as long as it doesn't idle below, say, 750 or 800. But it's hard to, I understand it's hard to envision that 106 will always do this and 108 it doesn't. It really comes down to what you have a duration of 50 on the intake, then you pick your exhaust, and then I do that per head flow. So if I have, say, 80% head flow, then I would normally pick, like, say, 230 duration on the intake, and then I would say, like, say, 5 degrees more on the exhaust, only because I'm running a full length exhaust. If it was open headers, it'd be a little tighter. If I wanted the power to come off at, like, say, 6,500 RPM, if I wanted to run this thing out to 8,000, I would add about 10 to 15 more degrees on the exhaust, so that way you can carry that power out. Then I would widen the LSA. I'd put it on, say, a 114 or even a 116. That would really carry that power out the back end. But let's just say I want to run that same camshaft, and I don't want to run it out the back door. I want this thing to be all over with, like, say, it comes off of a corner. Like, say, this is a circle track car. This is why they tend to have these. And you want to have that thing so that way it has instant power right off the corner. You'd run a 230. You'd put this thing on, say, a 106. You put it on a 102 ICL intake center line, and then you wouldn't run much exhaust on the back because that's going to build the torque. The tighter they're going to be together, with a say 80% intake and exhaust, it's going to make instant power right then and there, and it's going to carry that power, but it's going to fall off really fast, but it's still going to be up there in the power. So it's going to be really, really peaky, really, really spiky. But all you're trying to do is get off the corner, carry it, and then go into the next corner. Where, you know, in a drag race, a lot of people are going to be carrying, like, say, especially in a glide, you know, you're going to want an engine that's going to have, like, say, a little wider LSAs, because you only care about what happens 6,000 and above. You don't care what happens at 4,000. So they're, you know, with the smaller engines and the crappy heads, they used to be on 106s and 108s, but you're starting to see camshafts now on the 114 and 116 LSAs for drag racing, because by the time they hit off the converter, they're already at 7,000 RPM, and they don't care what happens below 5,000. They just want to keep all that torque. They want to sustain the torque out, and then that way they can carry the torque, because if you can carry torque out through RPM, you're automatically going to gain horsepower, because that's how it works. It's just a mathematical formula. So I understand that's hard. That's a lot to absorb, and I will keep talking about it, but LSA is not just a one size fits all, like a 106 is going to do this. It's a combination of intake and exhaust, and there's a few examples I kind of gave right there on how it affects two different types of engines and how it affects your street car. Usually the tighter the LSA, like we were talking about that guy with the Magnum engine a little bit ago. He had a 8.5, and it was on a 107 lobe separation angle on 225, 230. Now that's perfect, because the ram air effect at a little higher RPM, say at like 4,000 and above, that's going to trick it to thinking it's got better head flow. Yeah, it's going to be
compression, and
it's
get more air.
Exactly. So it's going to trick it to think it's a bigger, higher compression than what it really is. Now that you got to be careful with that because of detonation, but you know, you're going to trick it into making it think it's fatter, but then it's going to have flat spots, because it's going to have such a tight power band. It's going to come on fast, and it's going to go away really fast.
And that's usually like when you're talking about stuff like that, where they're really tight, like say the circle track stuff, when they have instant power, they also have generally crazy throttle response at that time, right?
That's right. And in fact, a lot of the cars, there's an engine class called the 604 crate engine, and they have these camshafts that are really dumb. I mean, they're like 212 or 220, but they're on like a 116 LSA. And then they have these other class where you can build your own engine. But what makes that 604 crate engine so bitchin' is that makes such a linear power. You can come off the corner and just flat foot it, and even a no-name driver can come off the corner and control that thing. Where people who are running, like say a 106, you know, with an open class style of engine where you can build it, they're really, really touchy as far as coming off the corner. They want to step out, it's called, you know. I did a lot of work with the circle track racing. I don't want to divulge some of the names, but you know, there was a few camshafts that we made, and he was, you know, the 604 crates basically just took over, and then we made a camshaft that he just started running the rings around them, and they were getting protested constantly, but it fell within specs. It just was, we just took some of the bite out of it, but allowed it to have a lot more meat in the mid range. We took out some of the hit on the bottom, so that way you could come out. So
Doug Narden digs your hardcore tech segments.
Awesome. Well, good. I'm glad. I put some thought into these. I just don't come. This is not just off the whim thing. So yes.
Well, Buick Smith says, will the even fire V6 heads work on the older odd fire 198 and 225s? I would assume yes. Just by screwing around with this engine family enough that I bet there's nothing changed in there except for the crankshaft and then the cam itself. There's nothing changed location wise. It's just timing of the camshaft, the crankshaft. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the Buick V6, even fire and odd fire is the two types of V6s that were around. The odd fire, it was the 225, and it virtually was a 300 Buick with essentially one set of pistons and rods, you know, two of them together, cut off the engine. Okay. Mm-hmm. The crank was the same way. They literally just sawed the front of the crank off. Right. And it's called the odd fire because what happens is, if you ever look at the distributor cap on one of those things, it's a V8 distributor cap with two capped holes where the two cylinders went. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, when they went to the even fire, what they did is they changed the crank to where there wasn't two rods on each individual throw. it changed to where there was one rod per each throw of the crankshaft. So they split it up to where it was more balanced and even. That was the problem with the Oddfire V6s. They were so out of balance because it was actually skipping 2 cylinders, and it would vibrate really bad at idle because it's essentially like missing 2 cylinders, right?
Yep.
And because it'll go for, what is it, 120 degrees before it fires again on those.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they went to the even fire, they evenly distributed where the piston rod relation was to how many degrees apart each individual cylinder firing was. So out of 360 degrees, it's separated by 6, right? And it smoothed the engine out considerably. Now, the only difference, though, is the crank and I believe the camshaft, because the camshaft timing had to change on it as well.
That's correct. Yep.
But I think that's because I know the main bearings are the same size. So I'm assuming that block has not changed at all. It was just a crankshaft. And what's funny is that later V6, so instead of having 2 throws together, they had to build 1 throw into each portion of the crank.
Yeah, they were essentially off by about that much, like that.
Well, since there was no overlap on those journals, they made the rod journal bigger on the Oddfire V6, and it actually uses the same bearing as a 455 Buick, so that they had enough overlap to where the crank wouldn't split. And you'll still hear them about them today. Generally, when the Turbo V6 guys, the Grand National, T-Type, Turbo TA group blew up a motor, that's usually what happened is the crank breaks. Mm-hmm. And that's because there's not a lot of overlap when you separate each individual crank throw.
Yeah. And you know that I grew up in Southern California, so I was really heavy into Baja racing. I did a lot of motocross, dirt, desert racing out there. And for a while there, like in the mid 90s, people were getting those Oddfire V6s from, like, say, the Bush series, and they were putting them in the trucks, and they just sounded, when you're on a KX 500 and you think you're going fast, about 110 or so, and you hear this thing that just sounds like every pissed off bee in the world passing you, it's a really weird sound, to hear one of those things at 8,000, 9,000 RPM. So yeah.
Well, and I grew up at the Buick Nationals, and we used to go every year from when I was a kid all the way up till I joined the Navy and moved away, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, it was kind of like commonplace to hear them, and I never really liked the sound of them, right? Because you got a V8 and they're beating on a V8, and it just sounds mean and cool.
Yeah,
right.
The bass.
Yeah, you throw the V6 in there, and it just sounds like a cow that you shot in the stomach with a spear gun, right? Like, and I never really liked them. And even the hot V6s, they still sound like that. I mean, like, it's dying faster, but yeah. But it still has that same sound. And I've never got over how, when they started taking V8s out of stuff and replacing with V6s, it was just like, oh,
right.
Like, the love is gone.
And imagine that in a truck that's hitting whoop-de-doos and going, oh, it's a sound you'll never get out of your head,
Yeah. Well, and those, if you're talking about the Bush Grand National ones, I don't know if those were Oddfire or Even Fire V6, but that was stage 2 V6s. That they were running those things.
Only thing is that when I was at Crowler, I did a lot of crankshafts for those, and they were the Oddfire. They were the
really?
They were the common rod, and we had camshafts for those that were the solid roller camshafts, and we made lifters and everything for them because we still supplied those things. So it was really cool. In fact we had a few guys that were still running those engines in Baja 500 and the 1000. So yeah, I did a lot of work with that stuff.
Well, I've never really. I started dabbling in the V6 stuff because man, you know how many of them I took to the junkyard in the 80s and 90s? Oh my gosh, it was like a billion, I bet, because every single one of them that came through my door. All right, so and I'm 46, right? So I got my driver's license about 91, 91, 92. I guess I've been 92. I turned 16. So 15, I was 91. All right. So the cars that were 6, 7 years old that everybody was buying to drive, as your first car, was all like these 80s Regals and Grand Prix and Monte Carlos and Cutlasses, right?
Yep.
And they all, if they didn't have a 305 Chevy, they pretty much had a V6 Buick.
Yep.
And my dad had figured out probably somewhere around 87 or 8 that the V6 Buick, you could use the motor mounts from the V6 Buick, drop a 350 right in place of that V6, and everything will work, including the fan shroud. You just cut it back 2 inches with a Sawzall. Perfect. And I don't know how many swaps we did of those. 1,000, I guess, because every time those cars were still part of the older lineage where you'd hit like, let's say, 100,000 miles. Nobody'd touch it. Nobody would even come close to it, generally over 60,000. And so you'd get these cars, the motors would be gacked at 100,000. And so we'd take it. What was cheaper? You go to the GM garage, buy a V6 crate motor. And that was like, I don't know, probably $1,800 those days. Or you get a 350 Buick takeout from the junkyard for $200 and drop it in, and it'll run circles around that 3,800. And the mileage wasn't that much worse either. I mean, you threw 2 more cylinders at it, and it got about 15 to 18 miles a gallon, and that V6 generally got about 20. So
yeah. Oh, we're way behind.
We are?
Oh, I still was. Yeah.
Olive chimed in here and said, I remember some of those wheezy GM V6s actually really like my 4.3 Vortec though. That one was a big surprise when they came out.
Yep, it was.
Chevrolet small block and V6 form, they kind of took a page out of the Buick 3800 book, made their own crankshaft, and voila, the 4.3 liter was born. Man, did they get the same mileages of 350 though. But they did run good. They did run really good.
Yeah.
Terrence Seymour. There used to be a stock car here in New Zealand running a V8 2-stroke Mercury outboard engine in the thing. That thing screamed.
I saw that on YouTube a long time ago. I did see that. That was looking cool. Yeah, because I'm a big 2-stroke guy. I enjoy them. I grew up racing them, and
the power band is just amazing on them.
Yeah, the sound, and the torque. It's not necessarily the power. Everyone's like the power band. The thing about 2-stroke is that's going to make way more torque right away, but it's uncontrollable torque, especially on like a KX500 I used to race, and it comes off the corner it's unstoppable. And then you hit the power band, but the 4-strokes basically just make the tractor type of power, so it's controllable, and that's the reason why they ran them. But I still have a love for 2-strokes. Whenever I hear 2-stroke running, I just get a little smile, want a little sniff of it, and I'm good.
Well, I used to hear stories like that about in Hawaii. At the circle track in Hawaii, there used to be a class where you could run it was small V6s. I think it was V6s, but you could also run a rotary in them.
Oh, yes.
RX4 rotary, or I think that's what they were. RX4s, little Mazda boxes back then, right?
Yep.
And my dad would tell me we used to go there and watch those cars because it was so neat that you'd never seen a rotary anywhere else in the mainland, right? And so he said, yeah, the Mazda would just kind of get beat up for the first 4 or 5 laps. I mean, guys would be just flat out running it over. But he's like, as soon as the header pipe started to glow, right, that's when you started watching this guy making strides. And I mean, it was like 20 mile an hour and everybody else, And it was just kind of neat. I always wanted to see that. And then when I went to Australia, there's a big contingent of drag racers down there that run rotaries. I'd never seen so many.
Yeah.
But they're all turbocharged. And man, I'm like, wow, this is so neat. I'm standing on their starting line with the guy I'm helping out. He's got, a front engine dragster. And there's these guys firing up this rotary Mazda. And I'm like, oh, it's cool. I got to see it right here. Well, they fired it up. And then it's like, pow, poo, pow, pow. And I mean, your eyeballs are blowing out of your face, your chest, right? Like, what the hell is going on? I said, oh, yeah, that's what 120 pounds of boost sounds like, mate, when you start hitting rev limiter. Like 120 pounds of boost? You got to hit me.
And they're loud. They are not quiet engines. Oh. They are extremely loud.
You're in for a rude awakening if you have never seen one of those rotary cars go down the track. They're fun to watch, but they are loud. The big one in the States, Orlando, I saw them. The guys were running. There's a lot of guys from Puerto Rico in Florida, and they were running the Mazda's rotaries in a Toyota Starlets was the big one.
Yep.
Same thing, but the car only weighed 1,900 pounds, 2,000 pounds, right? So let's see here. Doug Narden agrees with you. I think Klotz is HP perfume for two-stroker. Luke Smith, I have a 93 GMC 1500 4x4 extended cab with a 4.3 and the 5-speed manual. Gets 18 to 19 miles per gallon all the time. Looking to do better with the Elky project. Oh, your El Camino will get, I bet it'll probably get 18 to 20. And it has no overdrive, though. Well, yeah, you said no overdrive, right? 3-speed manual.
Yeah, 3-speed, yeah.
If it was me, let's see here. If you got that 346 posse, put that in there, drop your 3-speed manual, and go get a 5-speed manual, right? Like a T5, something that's meant to not rob any power.
Yep.
And I bet you that would be almost perfect.
Yeah. Be about the right power, too. You get one of those from like an S10. Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
And it would bolt right up to your GM bell housing. It'd probably cost $150. You can even get a hydraulic throw-up bearing for it, or run them with just a clutch fork, right?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't rob any power whatsoever. Your V6 wouldn't make enough power to break it, and you'd probably cruise down the road getting 24 or 25.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jonathan Cauchy wants to know, did you see that 3rd-gen Hemi Charger at Roadkill Nights, Tunnel Ram, Dual Quad, and Nitrous?
Yeah.
I think he took 2nd in his class really fast. Makes me want to do one. That's your bag, isn't it? The 3rd-gen Hemi. You love them?
I love them, man. Everything's going to that. I've got 3 in the garage, working on a 6.1. I've got a 6.4, and then I also have a 5.7. And the 6.4 and the 5.7 are the VVT. The 6.1's non-VVT, but they're my bag. They work. They're an incredible. I'm so done with breaking blocks. That's why I'm just done with the small block Mopars, and I went to the Gen 3 Hemi because it's a race car block with race car heads. As soon as you buy it, you've got the best. There's very few companies that make anything better than the factory cylinder heads. Send them out somewhere. I personally like Frankenstein. They do all my cylinder head ports. I'm not sponsored by them. They just do a good job. So that's why I always promote them. I've worked with those guys for years with cylinder heads, and they do a phenomenal job. And just get them ported for, $800 or $700, and you've got a heads that flow nearly 370 CFM factory. And on the 6.4 Apache head, you can almost get 400 CFM out of those factory.
For the common novice, 370 CFM is like about 740 horsepower capable cylinder head.
Easy, yes. And then you put boost on top of that, more.
Yeah. So, and that's factory stuff, right? So Doug Narden says he had a 90s S10 two-wheel drive with a 4.3 and a 5-speed. He thought it was a 350. It barked the tires in 4th gear. So, yeah, those things actually run good. Get some scratch, right?
Yeah.
Terrence Seymour says those rotary dragsters blow a lot of running gear to the high RPM rev launching. I had a mate who made it big, but the cost was crazy. Lawton Rotor Sports. I've never heard of them, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, I live on the other side of the planet, right?
Yeah.
Those things are just if you've never seen one, it's like Top Fuel racing. If you've never seen it, you got to go experience it at least once.
You have to. Yeah, I agree with you. It's something you have to see.
Bay Rose Garage. I used to sand drag a rotary. They were beyond loud. Yes, that's true. He's right there with us. So John Wilburn says, question for Dallas and Professor P. If you could combine the best parts and features of any engines ever mass produced in a V8 to rule them all, what all would you use? No constraints. All right. So we're starting clean sheet of paper, right?
Clean sheet. Okay.
Clean sheet. Deep skirted block.
Absolutely. Hemi head.
Hemi? Really? It would have to be something like that because I was thinking small block Ford, the Cleveland head with the canted valve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you get a hemispherical canted valve? Is there such a thing? The semi-Hemi?
I would go with I'd go with the Gen 1 Hemi. I would go like with a 331.
It's true Hemi.
True Hemi. Yeah. So I would actually go with the 331 industrial head. Those were there was like for 2 years, they actually outflow everything. It's ridiculous. They were designed for trucks, and they flow like 400 CFM out of the box. That's actually what all the top fielders used. If it would be me, I would do something with a deep skirted block, because that was the problem with the Gen 1 Hemi was the block. It was basically an LA style block, like an LA Mopar as far as the bottom, you know. I would do an early Hemi head. I would do a deep skirted block.
Well, so I'm going to say, since we're starting a clean sheet of paper, I'm not taking any bits and parts off of a specific engine, but the hemispherical head would make all the horsepower in the world, all of it, right?
Yeah.
But I would have to throw a LS style runner in there where it's taller, right? The way the velocity is higher, it's going to have all that torque too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what's a big factor in what makes that thing special, the LS special. But the hemispherical head would make it special in its own right, because it freaking have boatloads of horsepower.
Yeah, I would make sure that the intake port had like literally no turns. You could see the valve go down. It was a straight shot going straight in. There's no, humps, no turns. It was just a straight shot right into it. That's what I would do.
Priority main oiling, because everything I screw with is not, and it's like it's such a pain just to get that right. Priority main oiling.
Crankshaft that didn't cross over the center line as far as for oiling, so that way when you're coming from the main to the rods, it doesn't cross. It doesn't.
It's not an angle.
Yeah, it goes straight through, so that way it never goes across the center of it. It's always on this side, so the centripetal force is actually pulling it through instead of having to go across the center, where it actually is going into, like, I don't want to use the word free fall, but it's going across force and then coming back across force, which a lot of the aftermarket cranks do. So I would definitely do something like that, so that way the RPM, it would be unaffected by RPM.
Well, that's a good call, because I mean, otherwise it's getting centripetal force pushing it, and then it's pulling it away, right?
That's correct. So that way, that's when it goes across the center line. So if it doesn't, then your oil basically being pulled through, because it's on the end by the rod, it'll actually be pulled through on the main, on just from the force, because it's not going across the center line. So therefore you have the best of both worlds, and then you don't have to run a full groove main to keep the constant. You can run a half groove or even a 3/4 groove and still get that amount of oil, and it would survive.
And I would, just to piss everybody off, I would have to go with push rod engine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Just to make everyone mad.
Yeah. Like, those are extinct and archaic.
I hope that answers your question, John. That would be like dreamland, clean sheet of paper. But actually, he says to combine the best parts and features of any engines that were ever mass produced. So that would be just my type of thing, is I would take these, like we were talking about, as far as those features, that would be the best.
The other thing that I would think I would go with is, like, how like a inline 6 or even a slant 6 has more main journals, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think I would probably make the main journals, I don't know if you could make them thicker, but I would make them essentially a sturdy structural part of the block, and not try to cheap out on anything, that holds the mains in, because that's the main core of the engine, right?
Well, some of those top fuels actually have 4 bolts that go straight in, and then 4 bolts that come, so 2 from each
cross
side.
bolted from the sides.
Yeah, so it's got 4 bolts cross bolted, and that those you have 4 bolts in shear.
Right. So you're talking about the angled 4 bolts and then cross bolted from that.
Yeah, no, you got 4 straight down, like and because it's a deep skirted block, and then you have 2 that basically you see the 2 bolts on the side of the block sticking out, so they go essentially 90 degrees from those, and so those 4 bolts for each main are in shear, and then you have 4 bolts in tension. So
they're not splayed. Then you just want them straight down, and then straight 4 on the side.
You got
cross bolted, and main caps never walking or moving
ever. Nope.
And you'll never need main studs. Not once.
Not once. You'll be fine. And in fact, you use because then you would use the spring effect of the rod bolt or you could use studs, but you wouldn't need it really, because these two are going to be, the four going from the sides is going to hold that thing. So that would be the way to go.
Well, we got another question here.
Sure.
And do you think a 5.7 would do well as a 4-wheel drive in a 97 Mustang?
Sure. I mean, the 5.7, we've done so much testing with the 5.7. I'm assuming he's talking about a 5.7 Hemi. We've done so much testing with those things as far as camshafts. You can put a cam in those things and they make an easy 500 horsepower. Imagine what you had to do to make 500 horsepower in a V8 back in the 80s and 90s. This is a cam change. That's it. So I would say go for it, man. I mean, I would say that the Gen 3 Hemi is the new LS swap. That's just my opinion. There's a lot of companies making them so that way they can put them in G bodies.
And they're plentiful in the junkyard these days.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
All that stuff, like, it vanishes as soon as it comes in.
Yeah.
I've seen quite a few Gen 3 Hemis, and you're like, God, man, I remember when I was freaking waiting in line to get one of these things.
Everything's got its weak link. So with an LS, its weak link is cylinder heads. It doesn't have any head flow. Some of the best flowing heads that they came with are some of the early Hemi head flow numbers. The new Hemis just outflow them. The weak link of a Hemi is going to be the pistons, the ring lands, and the rods. But that's a simple, just rod and piston change, where people say, well, that's a simple, but yeah, you're going into the engine, but literally those things, there's almost zero wear on them. And then you can put, the factory heads back on it, throw a cam in the thing, and then boost it to the moon,
Well, that's what's funny is, like, the old engines are the ones that came with the super robust rods and crank.
Yeah.
And the new stuff is all powdered metal garbage.
Right.
But the heads flow 3 times as much.
That's correct.
Right. And they make way more power.
Yeah. We've done so much. I do a lot of camshafts for the 6.4 guys, and literally we do a lot of testing on those, and to the wheels, we're making an easy 500 horsepower with a factory engine and a camshaft. That's 500 to the tires through a ZF8 HP type of transmission. That's an 8-speed tranny. So they're insanely powerful. So I say go for it, man. You'll be happy.
So Ruckworts 1 here says racing is more a factor of money than any other thing. And I kind of disagree with that, man.
I agree. I disagree with you. I disagree with that statement also too. Now, to a point, that like cars like yours and mine that run in the 6.0s, you can still find factory parts, be creative, and true hot rodding will prevail as far as in the 6s and the 8th mile. There's a line that once you start getting into the 5s, yes, you're going to need to spend a ton of money, but from running to from a 7.0 to a 6.0, you could be smart with factory parts and get easily there and not spend a ton of money, especially nowadays with we were just talking about the Gen 3 Hemi stuff.
Well, and see, that's the factor that I've seen the big difference between today and yesteryear, right? Was, okay, so yesteryear, there wasn't a ton of parts available. Matter of fact, I never even saw an aluminum head available until probably the early 90s or late 80s, right? And so people would use factory stuff, right? Well, they would do it themselves.
Yep.
Is the thing. And that's where all those head manufacturers came from, is they originally were just porting cast iron pieces and making them work, right? And there's nothing stopping you from doing that. The thing is that people want to go out and they want to have the fastest car at the track, or they want to run a certain class. That's the problem with no prep heads up stuff, right? Yeah. Generally, when you're running heads up racing, the guy that's willing to spin himself into a hole will win.
Or die doing it.
Right. Those are the ones that's generally going to win.
Yep.
They got piles of money that they're willing to just burn to win $2,000. They're going to make it suck for everybody else.
Or a stupid trophy,
So the perspective should be this. Go out and set your own records and try to do something better each time.
Yep.
Right. I came up with an idea a few years ago that I've said it before on Tony's Wednesday Night Lives and stuff. I hated the way Bonneville is gone and Baja 1000. And those are at one time were measuring sticks for the sport, right? Those events. For you to field a Bonneville car that runs anywhere close to setting a record, you're probably going to have at least 8 figures in the thing, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm assuming 10 million plus. Okay.
Oh yeah.
But to go 200 miles an hour, you can literally go get a 1987 Regal that was designed to run 200 miles an hour at a track or a T-Bird and just get whatever engine you can find and spray it till the rods fall out.
That's right.
And run 200. Because you know what happens at Bonneville when you run 200? They give you a jacket. They give you a jacket. And if the thing lives to tell the tale, throw your buddy in there, let him spray the rods out of it, and he gets a jacket.
That's right.
And there's, I mean, that's the stuff that dreams are made of. When you home build a car and you go out there and run 5 or 6 people in a 200 mile an hour class record, they'll be writing articles about you, and nobody will talk about Danny Thompson going 1 mile an hour faster.
Yeah.
They're just not going to. You go down to Baja 1000. You'll never compete with the trophy trucks. That's another $10 billion operation, right? Don't build a Ford Ranger with a 302 and a bunch of nitrous or a single turbo on it and finish the race. Finish it. Okay, that's the big one because 50% of the cars don't finish. The law of attrition in Baja is horrible. If you can just finish the race, what kind of goal is that where you got a $2,000 truck or a $3,000 truck and you just finish the sucker?
Yeah, and that's a tough race. I've raced the 500. I've never done the 1,000. I did the 500, and you go through the silt beds, and that's 2.5 feet deep. That's to your kneecap of silt. That's just like powder, and it's for miles, 10, 15 miles, and you're just dying. You're just like, I want out of this. Your whole mouth is covered in it. It's everywhere.
If you want to see what he's talking about, there's an actual documentary on the Baja 1000 called Dust to Glory. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. They show you the silt beds, and there's cars that can't get out of the silt bed because it's buried so deep in the silt. And then when you start it up, it runs on. It's got to have air, right? Well, there's no air because the silt, as soon as you start it up, gets stirred up, and then they won't even run.
Yeah. And then it's actually, I've seen it. I think the silt has actually gotten worse because the engines on trucks are so much heavier, so much faster, and it just keeps getting churned up and churned up. You know, when I was going, it was still 2.5 feet deep. You know, this is in the 90s, and man, it was bad then. I couldn't even imagine now. You know, it was sit on the rear wheel, full throttle, don't even think about slowing down for 10 plus miles, and just is flat out and do not slow down because you're not getting going again.
So Dust Devil Garage asks, how did the new Hemis like nitrous change?
Factory, no dice. Rod, basically you're gonna have to take them apart. You can change the, open up the rings. You gap the rings. Yeah, I would change the pistons personally. I would change pistons and rods. Yeah. They're like I think it's hypertonic, but they're so thin, and where the ring land is to the top of the piston is a very small amount there, and they'll break. It'll break there, and it is the weak link in that Hemi engine. But you've got a great crank, a great rod, and a great head. So pistons and rods, for something that you can put together, you can get it, say, a $3,400, I think, is what you can get a 6.4 pull out for under 34,000 miles. I think it's like $1,600 for some rods and pistons, and you have an engine that you can literally make 1,300 horsepower with and not have a problem.
To give you a frame of reference, my cleaver and my T-Bird cost about $15,000. Yeah. And Shane just told you for about $5,800.
Yeah, under $6,000. Yes,
you can have something that would technically run with the thing.
Yeah. It's amazing. I have that 6.4 underneath my bench right now, and I have that engine rebuild that when the block cracked racing you, I look at him and I'm like, well, that one right there, I've got all this time, energy, and all this spent. It'll make 700 horse or whatever it is, 675. This one over here will make 675 with a cam change. It's like,
Well, Buick Smith says, I would love to do the Trans Pan America or the Peking to Paris rally.
Oh, yeah.
See, I love picking races like that, and just what's the goal, right? Like, you probably can't win.
Just
Finish the race.
Yeah.
They used to have those economy runs that Mickey Thompson used to do. I always wish those things would come back around. Like the Cannonball Run. I figured out about 3 years ago, I think I can take almost any Crown Victoria and win that sucker. and set the record so low that no one could even compete. And the reason why I say that is that car, I mean, a 4.6 modular is not the greatest thing on the planet, especially if you got to tear one down and work on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all go for about 300,000 miles. They're pretty reliable.
Yeah.
But they get decent mileage. They get like 25, 26, 27 miles a gallon. With a little bit of aero work and an internal, external fuel tank that you got in the trunk, I think you can literally cut half the gas stops out and keep the thing to the wood. And it'll run 130 miles an hour all day long. Get one of them old cop cars and just freaking beat it to death because you only got to go 2,000 miles.
That there's a guy who I watch a lot of the Cannonball Run stuff. I'm really kind of into that because I think that's awesome. This is actually one of the very first racing movies I ever saw. But there was a guy during when they shut down the whole pandemic thing. I don't know the exact time, but man, he set it so low they don't think it's ever going to get.
Is that the Audi S6 run?
Yeah, I think this guy was in a Mercedes Benz. I think it was the silver Mercedes Benz. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but he did it in some ridiculous amount of time.
Huh.
So I'll Google it.
Cheap turbocharged Buick and do it. Like a 3800. So Jonathan Couchy asked, would an NP 435 hold up behind a built 6.4 Hemi? Or should I just build it one of my 727s?
I would just build a 727 or go one of those brand new TKXs, Okay, so October 21st, 25 hours and 39 minutes. That was I'm trying to figure out the car real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm looking.
Oh, Dust Devil Garage says, I think there's plenty of small tire, no prep races you can do on a budget. I agree with that. I mean, the small tire stuff is what's the equalizer, right? That's what's going to limit you, but it's still going to take a lot of money to be competitive in that class. Especially when, do you guys remember when about the third season of Street Outlaws, I guess? I don't even watch it anymore, but it was probably about the third season. They were talking a lot about shocks. And shocks is what was making it all happen well for them, right? And then they threw out the price for the shock was like $1,400 for a shock.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember like screwing around. It wasn't that long ago where we were taking a Sears shock and drill a hole in it.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at $1,400 a shock. Like, get out of town. And that's where the money gets away. Somebody will figure out how to make it work and they can go faster and you just can't keep up. But for right now, the small tire stuff is booming. It won't be in 2 years.
You're absolutely right. It was an Audi S6 disguised as a Ford Taurus police interceptor. That's what it was. Yeah. Yeah, the guy said at the bottom right there. Yeah, so it was an Audi that made it look like a Ford Taurus. That's why I thought it when I saw it, it looked like kind of like a Mercedes Benz. But yeah.
And Jonathan Couchy saying that small tire no prep is so much. I'm assuming that means so much fun, and I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I like to watch it. I just, for me, it's just not. It's not in my wheelhouse to get out there. I mean, my 66 Dodge Dart is more like family now because, me and the wife started in that car street racing back in, 2000, 2001 in that car. So it's one of those things I just can't see myself putting a car with that kind of power in it going down a track that is sketchy.
Well, you know what? Things have changed because Shane and I both street raced in the same place, San Diego. Yeah. I love street racing in San Diego in the 90s. God, it had its own ambiance about it. It was literally like Camelot, right?
Yeah.
Everybody kind of knew everybody. Nobody was a dick to each other.
Nope.
All the stuff you see on TV was like, that's what happens at tracks now, because people see that and they think that's the way it went. But
It wasn't like that.
It wasn't like that at all. Nobody did that. You'd stand around, you'd find somebody that you could square up with, you'd razz them a little bit to get them out there, and then you throw some money on it, right? And that was really about it. You might say, oh, Ford can't run with the Chevrolet, instead of, hey, screw you, let me punch you in the face kind of stuff.
The only time you actually saw a lot of the razzing with each other is like when San Diego would go up to LA, or LA would come down to us, or if we went to Yuma, then we were in their house, and we brought money. And if you saw like $300 or $400 on a race, that was like, oh my God.
I never left San Diego. I never did.
Oh, you never did?
No, I always stayed. Well, I mean, I transferred and went around the world a couple of times, but
no, I know that. But as far as racing, you never went out to the
raced
desert?
with the groups and went outside of San Diego. And I had my '66 Mercury Cyclone GT. It looked like a clapped out shit box, because it was, and didn't really run with much. I mean, I had a guy had a Fairlane with a 289. Like, oh, you want to run him, man? I bet that thing don't run. Like, dude, this is a big block car. You might be picking on something that you can't handle.
Yeah.
But and it wasn't fast. It was like 1360s in the quarter. It wasn't anything.
But 1360s in the 90s, man, that was a fast car. You had something in the 13 seconds. I had a Bug that was like a 1390 before I went to a bigger engine in it. And I was, most of the tracks weren't even a quarter mile at this point. They were, short tracks, or just over an eighth mile, or, maybe less than 1,000 foot. And in a Volkswagen, you were up and gone in fourth gear, and you were tapped out, and they just could never catch you. So
those Bugs in San Diego, those things were fast.
Oh yeah,
fast, man. I'm telling you that. Just like the very first video we talked about it, I still can't get it out of my head that Carlsbad, the guy has that freaking rack on top. It's a Bug with a rack on top with a hood on it that's kind of hanging open. It does a burnout. It sounded really healthy, right? Like, whoa, wow, sounds pretty good. And then that sucker left, and that trunk was just flapping.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, this thing it's just like any other stick car. It's skittering all over the place as he's trying to shift it. And it was so much fun to watch. And it ran like 1279. And I'm like, oh, this got to be turbo on that, on a V6 or something. No, it was freaking Bug motor. Well, I imagine it was probably like a 2100 cc motor, but like a type 4 bus motors.
Yeah. The Type 1 was actually really, really popular. We used to have a company down there called Potter Racing, and in a Volkswagen Bug, the number 3 main was the one that always would obliterate. And so he would reinforce that, and there was all these different things. You had the AE, the AH, and the AZ blocks that were dual port. Oh, I could go crazy down the rabbit hole in Volkswagens, but yeah, I had Chevrolet rods in mine, Chevrolet pistons. I had all kinds of. It was cheaper than buying the Bug stuff.
Oh, well, Big Belly Racing's here saying, was the street races in the hood in San Diego? Detroit street races are in the hood. No, we were actually down the border. You're literally like a mile
on the
border.
Yeah, and there was food trucks like right there. There was food trucks, you know what I mean? And there was like, like Bob's Tacos, you know what I mean? It was just it was crazy, and then it was and there was like
many so neat because there was an AM PM down there on the 905 freeway. Yep. And we would all meet up at the AM PM like at 9 o'clock on Saturday, right?
That's right. Yep.
And then my buddy and I were, in the Navy. We couldn't afford to have anything cool. We just go out there to watch. And then if the cops showed up, they showed up, like, hey, I'm not street racing. I'm broke down over here. These guys are just racing.
Yeah, I'm in the Navy, man. I'm broke down. What I mean?
I'm poor. And so we just had a cooler, and we would buy like 3 or 4 40s and put them in the cooler. And the reason why you do the 40s is because it's only one bottle you got to get rid of, right?
That's right.
And we would get a big carne asada burrito or whatever they had special on the taco truck, and then we would haul out there to wherever it's going to race, because it always changed just a little bit every week, right? Yeah. Like 2 blocks over, 5 blocks over. We're going to be in the industrial area. We're going to be racing at the and for the junkyard.
Yep.
So
Yeah, right. That was the worst one, man, on that Nirvana Street there, because it had that little rise and then it went up and
dip,
over that. Oh my
yeah.
God.
But yeah, it wasn't. They weren't in the hood.
No.
They were kind of out. It's hard. It's hard to explain. It's not the country. It's like the industrial area of San Diego, which
But
is
it was, yeah,
literally like the border.
any farther than that and you're in the shrub brush, you're like literally like high desert. San Diego would be a desert if it wasn't just,
Right.
for the dew. So it's like shrubbery and the mountains. And that was down at the border. And then there was also racing in Kearney Mesa, where we would run on either Daggett Street or on Kearney Villa. And then there was an Escondido, and that was on Center City Parkway, and 3 different spots in Center City Parkway. And then we had the race off of the 78 by the Wild Animal Park. And that was a cool track because it was a 2-lane. It was a real quarter mile, and you went up a hill to slow down. So that was a really good one. But it got busted all the time. But
the one that everybody heard about probably in the 90s or early 2000s was the Kearney Mesa one, where people would get in accidents on there, right? Like kill people.
Yeah.
And that was when the import scene got hot. That's where they all ran at, right?
Yeah. And the reason why is because they wouldn't let 2 cars finish a race before they flagged 2 more. So they were on, where Kearney Villa would go across the 163 right there. They were on the south side of the 163, and they would just do laps. Like they would have like 6 cars. They would have 3 drag races going on at the exact same time. Just north of that, out there by Miramar, that's where the V8s and all those other people would be. And they would literally have 2 go down. They would come back. Then 2 more would race and they would come back. There was not like 6 cars on the track at one time. So yeah, I'm not saying that the imports killed it, but that was right around that whole Fast and Furious deal. And everybody had to go out and get their racing on. And it got really bad really fast.
It ruined it.
Absolutely ruined it. Yeah. We used to go to, in Miramar, we'd go to the In-N-Out there in that parking lot, and there'd be 700-800 cars. Imagine that, 700 or 800 cars in a parking lot for racing. It was insane.
Yeah, and it ruined kind of like the Camelot vibe to it, because that's where it got to be. There was too many people. They were doing dumb shit.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I think I've outgrown this scene. But before, it was fantastic. You could hang out there all night. The cops really wouldn't. They might see you. They might even stop. And they'd say, "There ain't no racing going on out here, is there?" "No, sir."
There was a few times at the track, and the cop would show up, and he goes, "You guys just keep the racing down a little bit." He goes, "I know that." He goes, "Just do one, wait a few bit, and then do some more, so we don't get any calls and I'll have to come back out here." And this is a true story. This is a true story. We were on Center City Parkway, and it was the end track. So it was at the very end of Center City when Center City goes, it's the last light before it goes into the 15. It goes through a tunnel right there. Now, I was at the light, and I was in the car with a friend named Chris, and a cop pulled up, and the light turned green. He looked at us, and I told him, "Go for it." And we drag raced a cop. It's a true story. Yeah, right down Center City Parkway. That was good. That was a good one.
I could totally see it back then, but it was a lot of fun.
It was fun, yeah.
Yeah, but my favorite cars used to be the ones that would show up from like Tijuana, had Tijuana plates on them, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, how good is this car going to run from Tijuana? Because I just passed
Haul-ass.
4 of them Baja bombs on the way down here, and they were dropping oil and like trannies, and the exhaust was dragging. And then how fast is this Nova going to be? Oh yeah, it was stupid fast.
Yeah, retarded. Like all the nitrous was going through that. You could smell the nitrous being, and you're like, oh my god.
That's what was funny. It was like the contradictory to everything that you've seen on the road from Baja, California.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But man, we're down to 6 minutes left of this live. Hopefully we've thrown enough good stuff at you here. Made Muscle was saying something here. I was at the races in Detroit on French Road back in 04 and 05 when one of the biggest street racing busts ever happened. Over 20 or 30 cars taken, sent to other states to be auctioned off. Wow. Man.
Mm-hmm. Well, what did it for me is when there was a big thing in LA, And you can actually go to YouTube and find this. They crushed cars and made the owners watch their cars get crushed.
Yeah.
And they're all the import styles, but you're talking about some really cool like Civic SIs, left-hand drives. I'm not sure if you're into all that kind of stuff, but if you go and look at it, they crushed some cars that's just terrible. I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. That's when I started really going more to the track.
And that's it really was Fast and Furious that ruined it, right?
Ruined it 100%. Yeah.
When that movie came out, 2 weeks later, it was junk.
Yep. Yeah. It didn't take it long. And literally, and then they were doing crackdowns and then they were putting speed bumps on things. And then, I got popped for street racing, and I wasn't even street racing that night. Now I was earlier, but that time I was not, and I had to go and do community service, and I hooked up with this, I forget his name, Scott Thompson, was a police officer of the San Diego PD. And that's when we got the Jim Fueling car that set the land speed record, that Bonneville car. And we took the engine out, sent it over to the San Diego Automotive Museum, and we put a quad 4 back into it, and we put it on 150 shot of nitrous. And that was their code 4 racing car. And then we got a Crown Vic, and we did an Allen intercooled supercharger with a 510 gear on it. We made it look like a cop car. Here's something funny, is I lived in Poway at that time, and I was doing all his work on his cars. So you would have this like cop car in my front yard, and I'd have a car cover over it. And I lived at the end of this dead end street, and it like Friday night, Saturday night, all the kids would come down there like Lover's Lane type of deal, right? And they'd be kind of like, doing, whatever. I would pull the car cover off, fire that thing up, and it had all the lights, it had all the sounds and everything. And imagine firing that thing up with all those people at the end of the street, man. They would just tear out of there. Oh, it was good stuff. That was good.
Yeah, that's when San Diego was great, because I mean, when I first got there, I was in the Navy. I was poor, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever been in the military and you're an E1, you know what poor is, right?
Yeah.
I literally made $18,000 a year, and that's with my CPay. So I took on a second job when I had time, and the only job I could find was I started working at this junkyard down in San Diego. And I'm not going to say the name of it because I'm 100% certain this place was not legit. Okay.
It was a cover, it was a front.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you how bad it was. We would get 93 Mustangs in, and this is 94, 95.
Mm-hmm.
Who takes a 93 Mustang to the junkyard? It's 2 years old, right? Yeah. I mean, it's still got payments on it. It's not totaled. And you'd go in, all right, we're pulling it off the truck and trailer, and it's got no column in it. And you're like, right, yeah, sucker, we better get it stripped down quick before somebody starts showing up and asking questions.
That's right.
And there was a number on the wall to call. If you ever got in any trouble or anybody questioning what you're doing, you just called that number, locked the front door, and walked out, right? That was it. That's what you were told to do. And I didn't ask any questions, and they paid cash. And I got paid per every car we stripped. It was like they bring these Mustangs in. They say, okay, you'd get $200 every one you stripped. And I worked with this old black guy. He was really old, like when they get white hair, right? Like, like Morgan Freeman looks now, like he's like 90, but he's probably only 75 or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's how this guy, he reminds me of the Curtis Lowe song, right? From, dang it. The guys from Jacksonville. Dang it. I can't remember their name right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. But we went in there. We'd strip these cars. And one day I went in and this guy says, hey, and they used to get the Auto Trader magazine. That's where on Thursdays, right? That was right. All this good stuff came out on Thursday. You better be there to pick it all
Thursday
up.
morning. Yes, right.
Me, and the guy's name was Otis. The older black guy that I worked with was Otis. And he say, well, we better get in there and see what they got, in the Auto Trader. Okay, so we look, and I'm like, oh, dang, I need to call these guys and say, hey, we need some cash. There's a K-code Fairlane in the Auto Trader, right? So we'd call them. Oh, all right, we'll bring you some cash. And how much are they asking? Oh, $1,500. And back then, $1,500 was a pretty decent car.
Yeah.
And so we jump in the flatbed, and he says, if it runs, you pay him what they're asking. If it won't run, pay him half, right? Okay, so we go over there. Hey, when was the last time it ran? I don't know, 1970. So we poured a little gas in the carburetor, and Otis would play with the points. Fire right off, right? Clattered like mad because it's got a big solid lifter cam in it. Hasn't had oil go through it in 30 years. But man, we pulled it up on the trailer. We had that car sold before we even got back to the shop. They had sold.
Wow.
But that junkyard was cool. They paid cash. I was happy. So I didn't mess with them. I didn't ask any questions, and I didn't look the gift horse in the mouth. I needed a freaking side gig.
Right.
To make payments, yeah. But that's the end of 2 hours.
Awesome.
It went by fast, man.
It did.
Was there anything you want to throw out there?
No.
Thanks for coming by, guys.
Yeah.
This is the 5th one, I guess. We got 59 watching now. I'd like to thank the mods, which is Blake from Bad Tree, John Wilburn. I didn't see any porn tonight, and that's too bad, right? We had to at least get one, but no, that's all right. You guys did a good job. So
yeah,
thanks for doing it with me, Shane.
Yeah. And if you guys, have any questions or whatnot that I didn't cover, like, there's a lot of chats kind of going down there. SlantDailyGarage@yahoo.com. Once again, that's SlantDailyGarage@yahoo.com. You can send your questions there. I got quite a bit last week, and I sent them all off. So, yeah, you guys can always just, if we missed one, just send it over there, and I'll see what I can do, and I can get to it.
All right. Well, then, if you have any, since there's no more further discussion to be had, we'll see you guys next Wednesday.
Yeah. Take it easy. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for coming out.